Good morning, ID. As I sought inspiration for this speech, it would have been nice to get the full ID vibe one last time. And even though I'm recording this speech from Kaplan, you and I know it's not the same here. But while the pandemic denied me this one last walk down memory lane, I still would like to start with a story. It's a little anecdote that illustrates what ID has fundamentally done for me, and will open up some reflections about how we might carry the best of ID into our careers. Almost 3 years in what feels a lifetime ago, it was week 4 of the semester, and I was young and green. It was Product Design Friday at the old downtown campus. In a few hours, Marty, our professor, would take us out for beers at Dugan's on South Halsted. However, at that moment, I couldn't think about happy hour. I was emotionally preoccupied. Mortified, really. On a table at the front of the room lay 21 foam core models of a desktop printer, one for each student. We had spent the whole week in the shop surrounded by the paraphernalia of foam core modeling. Think X-Acto knives, glue guns, various kinds of power saws. Some of us had stayed in the studio until midnight the night before, bending, gluing, joining planks to construct our replicas. It was a lot of hard work to execute what seemed like a very arbitrary assignment. Anyway, Marty, he was picking the foam core printers up, sort of one by one. He was kind of inspecting them, holding them to the light, scrutinizing them. They look good, he was saying. Then he came to mine. Oh, he said. I shifted in my seat. Something was wrong. At that moment, I realized it. I had placed the wraparound piece, the one that formed the main body of the printer, backwards. The join, which was supposed to be hidden at the back of the printer, was in the front, garishly staring back at me. A pit opened up in my stomach. I felt my heart rate speed up. The blood drained from my face. It was horrible. I felt like I was falling into a black hole. This design school thing was not going well. No way I was getting beers that night. The whole thing might seem trivial now, but you have to understand, this was foundation. And the incident triggered a whole chain of thoughts that was really typical during that year. Why did I leave behind my old career? Yes, it was soul-sucking, it was boring, but at least I was good at it. And here I was piling up sleep debt, glue burns, just to make a printer out of foam, and I was sucking at it. But then, interrupting the spiral of self-criticism, Marty gave a little chuckle as he examined my backwards printer. With his bemused half smile, he said, "Every year, there's always somebody." There's always somebody. What Marty was communicating to me was that everything was okay, that I wasn't alone in my mistake, that failure didn't signal a lapse in Marty's care for me as a student or a person, and that trying and failing was better than not trying in the first place. 3 years later, it's hilariously clear that my entire biophysical and emotional response was totally out of proportion. Today, I would have laughed it off and gotten beers at Dugan's. I probably would have had an extra one. But that's also kind of the point. At that mundane moment on a Friday afternoon in October 2018, the ID system was being applied to me. My counterproductive emotional response was not simply indicative of a character flaw. It was the product of my previous professional culture and its failure to prepare me for ambiguity and challenge. ID does not sell a cheap and easy creativity. Its superpower is to hybridize and hyphenate its people. We come as engineers, architects, business folks, theologians in my case, but we leave as engineer-designers, architect-designers, business folks-designers, a theologian-designer, whatever that is. ID doesn't erase our unique set of skills, experiences, and quirks. Rather, it embraces them, equips them, and amplifies them. It adds the designer to our personal identity. I'm convinced that this phrase, designer, signifies something intangible, almost spiritual. It's what proves that we're a mindset school, not a method school. And I'd like to highlight 3 qualities that I think get to the essence of this dash designer mindset. The first is being water. If design is the discipline of giving the proper form to an artifact, then we designers have to be formless, like water. As Bruce Lee says, do not be assertive, but adjust to the object, and you shall find a way around it or through it. Be water, my friend. It's way easier, though, to perform our self-brands rather than to put in the work of continuously building them. As designer Annika Izora says, if your actions are not ongoing, they're a performance, not a practice. So whatever we might post on LinkedIn or claim of ourselves through our portfolios, we nonetheless have to take pride in being water, listening, building self-awareness and competence until we find it's our time to flow in and through and around a problem. But water doesn't just flow, it also crashes. Embedded injustices require us to crash. We crash when we speak up, when we vote with our labor, when we center not only humans, but the highest humanizing values: solidarity, sustainability, equity. Secondly is being vulnerable to a problem. It requires a kind of psychological vulnerability to exist inside a problem, to inhabit that space between the is, which we deal with in research, and the will be, which has to do with implementation. It's not easy to stumble around the intermediate should be. It feels very uncomfortable and exposed, but it's also where we have to go again and again, whether pausing to sketch, rewriting the problem statement, moving the sticky notes around, or maybe just walking away and having a drink, like having a glass of red wine. Rather than giving into the anxiety to simply have an answer and be done with it, let's make ourselves vulnerable and allow the problem to drive us a little insane. Whatever comes out on the other side will be better for it, always. Lastly is being humble. When I was applying to ID, maybe many of you felt this way, but I remember observing the fanfare around design thinking. And designers seem to have this stuff of genius. They're smooth, confident, disruptive. Oh, what a word, disrupt. Who doesn't want to be disruptive? And it certainly was an attractive narrative. But of course, we know this narrative is self-serving. The more complex the problems, the more cooperative and inclusive the solutions need to be. What if we saw ourselves as contributors rather than solvers? What if our hard-earned skills and design powers, rather than returning acclaim and attention to ourselves, consistently and intentionally enrich the ecosystems and people with whom we worked? Being water, being vulnerable, being humble. I believe these qualities are indispensable as we launch our careers becoming design leaders in an era defined by its crises. We are emerging into the midst of them, and we will play a role, however small, in determining their future. But when I say that ID taught me these intangible qualities, I don't refer only to faculty or courses, though they were wonderful. I refer to this entire community of committed, talented, and inspiring human beings, my colleagues. During our time here, students rebuilt the entire student government. We've stubbornly maintained our culture amidst 14 months of distributed work. Think of the Humans of ID Slack channel, or the end of year show, which is now about to be staged for the second time, remotely. We've built anti-racist pop-ups and student advising toolkits, international food fests, and yes, Chicago's hottest Japanese breakfast startup. Our student community simmers with hard work, creative optimism, and dedication to purpose, both individual and collective. And so, my fellow Dash designers, congratulations on persisting to the end of this journey. Congratulations on the moments when Marty's comment, "There's always somebody," applied to you and you didn't give up. Congratulations especially on persevering through those moments you didn't feel competent. Through those moments where you felt unseen, unheard, not validated. Through moments of trauma or personal struggle, which have touched many of us in the past year, especially our Black colleagues and community members. Today, however, we celebrate. We've made it to the end, And so let's raise a glass to everyone who helped us to get here, family and loved ones, faculty and staff, Zoom dogs and Zoom cats, Miro, the IIT 711, and especially, though, our beloved friends and colleagues who have accompanied us and taken care of us through the weirdest and hardest 14 months of the century. As we depart ID for the next chapter in our journeys, I wish you the clarity of a Tomoko diagram, the joy of a Sari facilitation, and the care and fellowship of a night out at Dugan's. Thank you.